The Lending Tree Bowl? The Guaranteed Rate Bowl? The Quick Lane Bowl? I sometimes wonder whether I'm betting on college football games or making a loan payment. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week, I'd like to return to some of the kind of crazy bowls that are no longer being played, and also a tribute to the second oldest bowl game. And I'm sure most people who follow even college football might not even be aware of this bowl game as being the second oldest bowl game in the history of the NCAA. So I hope that we can get right into things, but I'm going to segue first. Of course, I'm wearing a West Point jersey here. I had the privilege and pleasure of working the game yesterday. It was won by Navy, another gut-wrenching, gritty, determined effort by the midshipmen to basically really put a kibosh on the Army football season. In this respect, the Army Black Knights were really looking forward to, ending the season with not just a win over Navy and capturing the Commander-in-Chief trophy for the second straight season, but then using this as the bounce off to playing Missouri next week in the bowl game. And that should be an interesting contest none the least. It was a great game. I tell you, it was really back and forth. Army actually had the lead 13-7 at halftime, courtesy of a couple of field goals and a big run to start basically third play into the game by the Army quarterback. And it was really there were three big plays by Navy that actually won the game. A reverse by Navy, a fake punt by Navy, and then there was like an option pass by Navy. That was on the drive in the second half that secured the lead for the midshipmen, and they would never lose the lead. It really did come down to just a couple inches here and there, one more play for the Army team, etc. But it was a great game, fantastic. I'm going to promote the Army-Navy game from this respect, that it's not just the football game. It really is a celebration of our nation's military history. And there's just so much action off the field yesterday. I'm not talking about, kids swimming in a pool or playing video games. I'm talking about, just watching the midshipmen and the Army cadets march in, seeing all of these military brass all over the stadium. The halftime festivities with just the Navy brass performing beautiful renditions of some of our most patriotic songs. Lee Greenwood also had his famous song, Fireworks. The Jets, actually the jet fighter planes, came over the day before. I heard them while I was outside, and helicopters for the Army. It's just a tremendous experience. And it's well worth, if you ever get a chance to have the privilege and pleasure to go to the Army-Navy game. Now, I've been lucky to go to two. So it's just a great time for everybody. Anyway, it was a gut-wrenching loss for Army. They are going to finish with a bowl game against Missouri next week. For the midshipmen, I think they started the season either 1-3 or 1-4. So, whether they finish 3-4 or even 3-4 or 3-5, they look to be. They're going to turn it around next year. I really do mean that. And I always root for the military academies, all three. I've always been an Air Force fan ever since I was a kid. I just love their uniforms and all the rest of it. But I just want to segue into some of the bowl games that you're going to be seeing. First of all, I have never seen so many 6-6 ball clubs as I have this year, all getting to the bowl game. And you're starting to wonder whether they shouldn't even name them bowl games, or they should just extend the season and just have some fun matchups at the end of the year. Because outside of the Final Four with Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, and Cincinnati, um, really the bowl games are meaningless. Except for, I have to be honest with you, except for the schools that normally don't get to play in, let's say, the bigger time games on New Year's Day, it's a big deal. But really, Ohio State, yeah, they'll probably win their game, but I think you know what I mean. It's they go for the title. Notre Dame against Oklahoma State. The only reason that I'm really interested in the game is that I've never seen Notre Dame in all my years play Oklahoma State, so that fascination is there. Plus, they got a new head coach coming in, so it should be interesting. Um, I'm just thinking of other teams. I will be turning into the Pinstripe Bowl. It's one of my favorite, and not because I'm a New York, New Jersey fan. No, I like it because it's played in the mud. It's played as the sun is going down, and there have been some really fantastic games there. The one that always comes to mind is the Syracuse-Kansas State game in one of the early years of the Pinstripe Bowl. And it really came down. It was played in the snow. The guys got muddy. It was just great. And now you're going to see, I believe, the inaugural of the Fenway Bowl. So that should be interesting. I right now I can't recall the two teams that are matching up. I know one of them is not Boston College, which would have been kind of cool to have them there at Fenway. And I'm just wondering how far we're going to open the doors to the bowl game. As I said, I maybe I mentioned last week, I think the best bowl games to go, unless you're not playing for the national title, are either in Hawaii or the Bahama Bowl. And I actually like the Bahama Bowl because that starts the college football bowl season. So you can go there December 17th. Yeah, it's going to be played on a Friday afternoon. So that's kind of cool. Come home Friday afternoon, watch a little bit of the game. It starts at 2:30, or they may even be starting at noon. Regardless, you should be able to capture see some of the game, and maybe have a pizza or a submarine sandwich and watch maybe the last half. But for the players, like, I gotta be honest with you, when I was doing my research on some of these places where these bowls have been held, and I'm saying the Bahama Bowls is for like the lesser rated teams or the lower ranked conference and stuff, baby, that's where I want to go. The Bahama Bowls. You have the whole weekend. You still have Christmas and New Year's to look forward to. What a great way. You can work on your tan, really just rest up, bathe in the warm waters and also the nice sun of the Bahamas. I've been there a number of times. It's a beautiful, beautiful island system. So I think everyone's missing it. Who wants to go? Nothing against Dallas, but who wants to go to the Cotton Bowl when you can go to the Bahamas, especially when the Cotton Bowl is not part of the Final Four playoff system? And give me the Bahama Bowls or give me Hawaii. I'd rather go to the Bahamas only in this respect. I'm not traveling like 6 hours, into a 6 hour time difference. And it must really you must be really jet lagged coming back from Hawaii. Bahamas, East Coast, you fly down, boom, 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 maybe a couple hours on the plane, maybe an hour both ways in the airport and stuff, but you're relaxed. So I think it's a great bowl game, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere but upwards among the colleges. And that is where I'm going right now. So I'm going to segue right into this and just mention these are some of the bowl games that have been played in the past. I'm just going to get right into it. I do have some great photos or pictures. This was the Tampa Cigar Bowl. But I was looking at this bowl game. It was called the Cigar Bowl. And you would think it was actually sponsored by the Egypt Temple Shrine. And I believe it was the Temple Shrine was a fundraising event, obviously. It actually lasted quite a few years. It went from 1947 to 1955. And the reason why I'm saying that is that they actually played a number of times where they actually played from 47 to 54. But on two occasions, January 1st, 1951, and December 29th, 1951, and then Jan 1st, 1954, and then December 17th, 1954, they had two bowl games in one year, calendar year. 3, 6, there were 9 times that this was played. These were some of the teams that were involved. Originally, I thought when I saw this, and of course, here's the beauty of what this show has allowed me to do. I get to talk anything sports, but I really love thinking about things and then doing some research because there is no such thing as a sports expert. I think that people make that mistake. Every time you hear that, there's always something a person doesn't know. And I am certainly not a sports expert. I do love delving into sports history. I love the trivia. I love statistics. I love the metrics of the games. I love the players and all the, the idiosyncrasies and all the crazy kind of things that go on in games, etc. But I am certainly not an expert. This, though, show allows me to really, and this is where a shout out to Howard, he lets me do whatever I want. And during the week, I'm always thinking, all right, what do I want to do? And so it's college football season. I did devote one previous show to old bowl games that no longer exist. And I really was intrigued by it. Well, when I saw the Cigar Bowl, I got to be honest with you, it's a great name for a bowl game. It would never fly today, the Cigar Bowl. And the only team that of the 18 teams that participated, or of the 9 games that were played, the only team that still kind of exists on Division One, because it wasn't Division One per se, was Florida State. They played on January 2nd, no less, 1950, and they beat Wofford College. Now, I know this about Wofford College. Ready for this? Florida State did win the game 19-6. Here's what I know about Wofford College, just off the top of my head, and this is what I mean. It's amazing how I can remember things from 40 years ago, and I can't remember to take out the trash that my wife asked me 2 seconds ago. But that's another story for another day. Wofford College was a last-second replacement to play Clemson in the 1980-81 football season. Originally, Clemson was supposed to play Villanova University. And what happened, and I know this for a couple of reasons. One is I knew some players on the Villanova team. Now I'm dropping names or anything like that. I just knew them. I either went to school or from the same town or whatever. But Villanova dropped their football program. And Wofford was a last-second replacement to play Clemson that year. And, of course, Clemson goes unbeaten, really manhandled Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. And I just remember seeing, I think it was Perry Moss makes the cover of SI. And, of course, I didn't download that because, as I always say on this show, I don't know where I'm taking this. We're sitting in a bar having a couple of beers and a hamburger. And one thing leads us to another. And as I was going on this, courtesy of Wikipedia, I saw Wofford just as I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, oh, wow, I recall that. Clemson really manhandled Nebraska. The game wasn't even as close. I think it was maybe 22-15, but it wasn't even that close. You know how games can be, the score looks, it was deceptive. Anyway, they won their first national title under Danny Ford, and I think they finished 12-0. And I just remember them making the cover of Sports Illustrated. Number 22 graced the cover, and I believe it was Perry Moss for the Clemson Tiger. And, of course, I always loved that paw for a helmet. I love the color orange. I know they probably overdid it with all the orange on that, but really today, nobody even thinks a second about it. It's just incredible. But it was just, it really just, for whatever reason, that cover was just beautiful. And I've always liked orange as a sports color too. It's just unique. Most teams are red or blue. But but the orange really, it's just different. Anyway, Florida State still playing Division One. Played in the 1950 game. Here are some of the participants. Missouri Valley beat Westchester 26-7. Delaware in the first game ever played on January 1st of the Cigar Bowl, 21-7 over Rollins. And Rollins, of course, I believe is in Orlando. So it was a local team when you think about it. And actually, a shout out for Rollins. I know they have, I think, a pretty good baseball club, pretty good tennis. And I also know that sports announcer Christopher Russo, I believe, went to Rawlings. So that's where that bounces off. Westchester, of course, out in Pennsylvania. Then Missouri Valley. I was looking at Missouri Valley. I really thought this when I first looked this up. I really thought, well, the Missouri Valley, was it a bunch of all-stars that played in this game? No, actually it is a college, Missouri Valley College. And then, of course, we all know it as a conference, and that's why I thought it was Missouri Valley Conference All-Stars. You have Wisconsin lacrosse in 1951. They played Valparaiso. Brooke Army Medical Center beat Camp Lejeune 20-0, or Lujan. Tampa, which did have a program up until like 1975. And this is another thing that just is a shout out. University of Tampa had the number 1 draft pick, John Matuzak. And I remember him, I believe, gracing the cover in a college all-star uniform. The Houston Oilers, who I kind of rooted for when I was a kid, they selected him as his number 1 draft pick. He never really materialized or never lived up to all the hype that the Oilers were hoping. And of course, he gets dealt to the Oakland Raiders, where they sign him as a free agent. And of course, his career really is elevated because the Raiders are always playing in the playoffs and we're always playing for a championship. And I do believe he played on 2 Super Bowl teams. So that one jumped out at me. And here comes Missouri Valley for a return for a third time. This time they hooked up with Wisconsin lacrosse and actually tied 12-12. And then the last game was Tampa beating Charleston. Now, I'm pretty sure it's the College of Charleston. It was another blanking, 21-0. The cigar really turns to ash. And I'm getting a terrible pun in it. But this was a stub or a ticket from the game I do believe, 1949. So if you went to this game, you were seeing Missouri Valley versus St. Thomas of Minnesota. And I believe St. Thomas is a big-time school, Division III, because I remember reading an article about them. They had a coach who was very soft-spoken but was a big-time winner. I think the big thing with him was, I can't remember his name offhand, he never blew his whistle, never had to really shout at his players. He just had a very even keel, even disposition. Kind of remarkable that this coach, and he lasted for like 40 years or whatever. But Missouri Valley, if you had a ticket to this game, you saw a 13-13 tie. It's amazing. They had 2 ties in the 9 games that they played. And of course, why I bring that up? Well, if you had seen the show last week, I hope you did, you'll know actually 2 shows. I had it on the NFL ties in 1967. I went through a number of teams. And actually, I went through the 4 C's, the Capital, Coastal, Central, and Century divisions with all the teams and all the players. Now, this was called the Great Bowl, which I think they kind of turned into. The Great Bowl kind of comes the California Bowl. It kind of went under, or it kind of changed names. This game was played for 2 years. But then it disappeared. But then it comes back. It morphs into what we saw as the California Bowl or as the Raisin Bowl. All right. And that has more of not just an appeal, but it has a longer lasting. But this Lodi Grape Bowl, played in Lodi, California. The first game was the College of Pacific, which I believe now is University of Pacific, and they beat Utah State. And of course, Utah State is still playing big time. I don't think University of Pacific has a football program, or if it does, it certainly isn't from the glory days of the 1940s. The second game also had Pacific in it. And what happens? They tied Hardin-Simmons 35-35. But this was the program from the official program, as if anybody would sell kind of like forgery ones. I'll never understand that, why they put the official program up there. I will tell you this, though. I am sure for collectors, if you had this in mint condition, which is what they always love, this probably is probably get you a couple of bucks. Probably get you a couple of bucks. One thing that I will tell you, they do a nice job on this Wikipedia. 35-21, and they have the scoring information from the first game. Basically this, it wasn't even as close as the score indicated. It was 35-21, but Pacific races off to a 28-0 lead. Wayne Hardin, who does become, I do believe, the Navy coach. He kicks. Yep, he becomes the Navy coach. And the Temple coach from 1970 to 82. He had a 118-74 record in college, and he is in the College Football Hall of Fame. So Wayne Hardin appeared in the very first game. Then he has another kick. Actually, ready for this? College Pacific had Eddie Lebaron. Of course, I think we talked about Eddie Lebaron. He had a kind of a crazy end of his career. Eddie Lebaron, I believe, played for the 49ers, played for the Cowboys, and I know I'm going to mess this up, but I believe he got dealt to the 49ers or something like that. It was kind of, you know what? I'm not even going to say it right now, but he has kind of a crazy ending to his career where he got traded to one team and really asked to be traded back because he was starting up, I believe, a loan or a mortgage company, and he had really established it, I believe, in Dallas, and Dallas had kind of sent them back into San Francisco, even though he was the San Francisco starting quarterback. He asked to go back. It's kind of a crazy thing. You know what? Next week when I maybe I'll tie up some of the loose ends on a couple of things. And Eddie Lebaron played for the College Pacific, and so you're talking about two big time players, or two big time college football celebrities. Wayne Hardin, of course, is in the Hall of Fame. Spent a good deal of his time at Temple, and it was also the Navy coach. And Eddie Lebaron, I just remember him being called Little Eddie Lebaron because he was about 5'7", 5'8". Anyway, for College of Pacific, they ran off a 28-0 lead, and then just really probably just ran out the clock, so to speak. The final score is 35-21. The closest that they made it was really the final score, Utah State. Now Utah State is playing bowl game this year. They finished 9-3. It looks like they are having maybe we're going to be talking about them in the Mountain West next year as a pretty good ball club. And, they might be favored there as well. Now, I got to be honest with you. The other game was a 35-35 tie. And in that game, it was 21-0 early for Hardin-Simmons, 28-7. And then, of course, College Pacific comes all the way back, ties it, and actually took the lead. And then a 3-yard touchdown reception by Bob McKenzie from John Ford, and the extra point kick by Paul Bailey ties the game, and that's how it ended. That had to be a fantastic kind of a game. You race off, everybody's they would probably turn off the TV at 28-7. It is in the third quarter, and then here they come with Eddie Lebaron leading the comeback. They make it 28-14, 28-21, tie the game, take the lead, and then surrender the lead and end in a tie for the second and last game of the Great Bowl. And like I said, eventually, that whole area, Fresno, Lodi and stuff, it would be replaced by the California Bowl, which I don't believe has been played in quite some time. That actually, for a while there, the California Bowl was being played, and of course I can't find it here. The California Bowl matched, I think, the MAC versus, because Fresno State was in it, I think the Big West. So they matched the MAC conference of like Bowling Green, Kent, Toledo, Akron, and all the rest of it. And they would play, and it was actually a pretty good game. I know, maybe for the real college football fans that just love watching college football, I always liked it because it had started off the college football season in the late 80s, early 90s. They would play that along the same lines, like December 17th, 18th, that Saturday before Christmas. And you'd always get kind of a cool game. You get to see two teams you normally wouldn't see. They would be matched up. It was kind of like the Pac-10 or the Pac-8 versus the Big Ten, or the Pac-10 versus the Big Ten, because all the teams from the MAC were from the major industrial center of the Midwest, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, etc. Ball State, Toledo, Akron. Michigan had Eastern Michigan, or Central Michigan, etc. And then they would play the Big West, which had Fresno State, San Jose State. They might have had even, I want to say that they might have had like Nevada, Las Vegas there. And now Vegas is, of course, in the Mountain West. Another game. Speaking of which, I wanted to show this to you, and that was the Glass Bowl. The reason why I love this one, here is the Glass Bowl. Played, of course, in the city of Glass, Toledo. And I just always loved this, the Glass Bowl. It had 4 years. This game, though, was played in early December and probably wasn't seen as a postseason bowl game as much as, from what I've read, it was seen more as, how Notre Dame plays the Shillelagh Bowl now, or you might think of the Army-Navy as a bowl game, but even though it's part of the regular season, or you have those Big Ten games where the old Oaken Bucket game, or the Border War, or the Iron Bowl, that type of thing. Well, Toledo would call it the Glass Bowl. They actually had 3 of the 4 years they won, and then the last year they got thumped by Cincinnati. It's great because here's Cincinnati now potentially playing for an NCAA title. They got a tough road ahead of them playing Alabama. But, the Ritter, I really do like him. I thought he probably should have finished higher in the Heisman Trophy. He had a remarkable last 2 years. Only lost one game, and he lost that to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl on some questionable calls actually in that game. Not by the referees, just questionable calls by the Cincinnati Bearcats. And what I mean is that game, and I think I mentioned this in an episode in early January, they threw the ball when I thought they should have run the ball and wasted more time. As it is, they left too much time on the clock for Georgia to really make an assault downfield. And then, of course, Georgia wins it with a 47-yard kick as time expired. And Cincinnati really, I'm not saying they outplayed them, but they were winning basically for 59 and 30 seconds. Kind of like the Auburn-Alabama game. That game, I'm telling you right now, Notre Dame fans are looking at that game, me among them, and saying, had that kid just stayed in bounds, that's the 30 seconds that Alabama probably would have exhausted or not have to win the game with the touch, to tie the game with the touchdown and send it into overtime. Really unbelievable. You can't blame the kids. They're still amateurs and all the rest of it. But when you're looking at a game and analyzing, and that's what I like to do, that was a big play. Not, he should have stayed in bounds. Maybe, I know he was trying to go for the extra yard. He probably should have just sat, just went into the ground and wasted more time. But anyway, Toledo apparently played all three. They kind of hosted it. And these are the teams that they played. Bates College, they beat them 21-12 on December 7th. Interesting. They played on December 7th, 1946. All right. December 6th, they played and beat New Hampshire 20-14. I know that New Hampshire is, I believe, an FBS team. In fact, I think they had a pretty good season this year. Toledo defeated then in 48 Oklahoma City 27-14. And then, like I said, Cincinnati throttled the Toledo Rockets 33-13 in the final game that was played of the Glass Bowl. Now, love this cover. I love the art. It is so typical of late 40s, early 50s look of programs. But also, if you guys saw, or if you went to school in the late 60s, early 70s, and you were still using books from the late 50s and stuff, this was the type of style of art that you would see in your textbooks, particularly your reading books. Actually, you know what it does remind me of? Kind of like the Claire B. novels of the late 40s, 50s that kids would read. Same look. Beautiful stuff. I can't do it. I love the tone, love the shadowing, but it so typifies the magazines and all the rest of it that you had that are now collector's items of the 40s, 50s, and really into the 60s. The inaugural Glass Bowl. Now, the reason I'm bringing up Toledo, the man, now listen, I'll get my directions. The man holding that crystal china, interesting fact. Of course, that's Nick Saban, not Lou Saban, who I continually always confuse him with. But really, his records should never be confused with Lou Saban. Lou Saban, it's amazing. He really was a nomadic coach. I think I counted one day, he had stops in about 15 to 16 different places. He coached in the AFL. He coached in the colleges. I even believe that he coached in a number of different leagues that, fell apart after a year or two. Even George Steinbrenner, I believe, offered him like a scouting position or a general managing job with one of his minor leagues. That's Lou Saban. He was an interesting guy. This Nick Saban, the reason I bring up Nick Saban is that he actually had two teams that went 9-2. One at Toledo. He did coach at Toledo, interestingly enough. He was there for 1 year. But Toledo did not go to a bowl game. Today, if they were 9-2, do you realize maybe if the bowl games were more open instead of contracted to specific conference and stuff, he might be playing that Toledo squad today going 9-2, might be playing in a, maybe you take them and stick them in the Bahama Bowl. But Saban, interestingly enough, went twice 9-2, once at Toledo and once at Michigan State. It did not qualify for a bowl game. In fact, in his lengthy career between Alabama, LSU, Michigan State, and Toledo, he's been in a bowl game every year except 3. Back-to-back at Michigan State and at Toledo. Really, the first year, I think he was either 5-6 or 6-5, and then he is 9-2 at Michigan State the following year, and then takes off. And like I said, he was 9-2 at Toledo. This fellow over here, I don't know how many people. He's an interesting guy. This is Jeff Tedford, and he has held He was a player specifically in the Canadian Football League, something I plan on doing. He went to Fresno State, and I do believe he might have played in one of those California Bowl games. He played for the Tiger Cats of Hamilton, Calgary Stampeders, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But here's the interesting thing about Tedford is that he kind of resurrected the Cal Bears. He becomes their coach. And interesting thing, he seemed to have Cal on the up and up. I was looking at him, and he was, after previous coach Tommy Homo resigned from his post amid a 1-10 season in 2001, the worst in Cal's history up to that point. The Bears would go 1-11. I'm just reading from Wikipedia. The athletic director hires Tedford to become California's 32nd head coach. He inherited a program that had not had a winning season in 8 years, 9 seasons, and only had won 29 games. During his time, though, he really brought them to new standards. They went 7-5 in their first year. They ended a 19-game losing streak to Washington. They beat arch rival Stanford. Then in the following year, he goes 8-6. And in that year, he actually upset USC in triple overtime, who would be a national co-champion in 2003. And then he beat Virginia Tech in the Insight Bowl game, 52-49. My whole point with this guy, Tedford, is that it's amazing. He gets them all. By the way, the following year in 2004, I do remember this, Cal goes to number 9 in the rankings. He got them up. They finished 10-2. I think they were 5-0. And then they lost a big game. But they went 10-2, lost to Texas in the Holiday Bowl. But then he has a bad year, and all of a sudden, 2005 he goes 8-4. Then 2006, they were 10-3. And then all of a sudden, in the 2000 campaign, they race to a 5-0 start. They're actually number 2 in the rankings. Their highest, again, I'm reading from Wikipedia, since 1951. And but then the bottom fell out. And all that work that Tedford had done, it just seemed to collapse. And of course, Tedford was without a job within like 2 seasons. And I'm just saying, it just is amazing how the colleges go highs and lows. And I mentioned Cal because, at that point, he had almost gotten them to the Rose Bowl. A couple of things break their way, etc. If he had gotten them to the Rose Bowl, that would have been the first time since 1959 that Cal had been there. And now where is Cal today? They're back really at the bottom. So it's really the highs and lows of programs, and you can understand why hiring a coach is really so important. He definitely brings, I know they like to say, a philosophy. He likes to bring an attitude. He likes to bring certain things to the program and all the rest of it. And generally that's true. Especially one that is just dying for a winner. And if you get that right coach, then you're putting that team on the right path. Okay, now I did want to break into this. I got a couple minutes here, 5 minutes. These were guys who would have distinguished careers. Charlie Johnson, Jim Kick from Boonton and the University of Wyoming, Burt Jones from LSU. Oh, Charlie Johnson went to New Mexico, A&M, and then it became New Mexico State. You had Thurman Thomas, Cornelius Bennett, and Tony Franklin. And I do want to finish the show with this particular player, and I'll get to him in a second. If I don't, I'll save him for next week. What do these 6 players have in common? They all played in the second oldest bowl game, the Sun Bowl. The Sun Bowl. Now, I have to be very honest with you. I think I've watched maybe 5 Sun Bowl games. Never the entire game. The only one I probably ever watched was Notre Dame beating Miami. I can't believe that's already 11 years ago. I watched that game. But the Sun Bowl came into being in 1935. Basically, it seemed to be a Western Texas kind of a bowl game. So it was UTEP, or Texas Western at the time, played in a couple of them. And Hardin-Simmons, Texas Tech. They also had teams like the Texas Mines. All right. Actually, the Rangers of Texas, kind of wild stuff. And Western Reserve played Arizona State. So Southwestern played New Mexico. So you can see the gist of the game, that it seemed to be a very regional Sun Bowl game. Probably teams that were, well, not so much overlooked, but definitely had independent schedules and were taking away. And Texas Western played in the 51. West Texas State played in the 51 game. I'm going to save him for next week. And I'm going to continue saving the Sun Bowl. I would like to have some fun with the Sun Bowl for next week. But the reason I bring up all this is, the interesting thing is the Sun Bowl has really had some packed audiences. And of course, they've had about 12 games where they've had over 50,000 since 1935, and another slew, probably a dozen or so games where they had over 40,000. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot until you realize that's not too bad for a bowl game that does not have the same identity, even though it's as old as some, even older than the Sugar Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl. Not as old as the Rose Bowl, but that's the granddaddy of them all. And I would love, as I'm going to leave this as a teaser for next week, these 6 players. And of course, I'd like to devote a little bit more time to basically the mystery player. Hint, played for Lafayette. Hey, this is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come into your home and talking everything sports. Have a great week. I'll see you here next week.